Samantha Hayes sat quietly in the first-class cabin of Flight 917, a powerful black female CEO who was no stranger to luxury, but also accustomed to the judgmental stares and subtle discrimination she faced every day. As the founder and CEO of Hayes Tech, a leading technology company, Samantha built her career from scratch, overcoming countless challenges. She is one of the most powerful women in the technology industry, with influence not only domestically, but also internationally, having been named one of the most powerful women by Forbes magazine for many years in a row. And today, like every other international flight, Samantha was about to enter an important deal in Geneva. She had pre-ordered lobster soup and prime steak, her favorite food, for every flight. Everything had to go according to plan, as usual. She entered the first-class cabin in an elegant black suit, her shiny leather shoes reflecting the lights from the lounge, her curly hair neatly tied at the nape of her neck. All eyes were glued to her, but no one said anything, just silently observing, as if not wanting to see her too clearly. As she stowed her Hermes bag in the overhead compartment, a stewardess approached, her gaze briefly glancing at Samantha before quickly shifting to a white male passenger standing behind her. The stewardess smiled warily, then said, "Sorry, ma'am, your order is out. All that's left is a cold sandwich and a glass of water." Samantha said nothing. The coldness and disrespect from the flight attendant's words and actions cut through the luxurious atmosphere like a knife, making her feel like an outsider in this space. The other passengers around her were enjoying caviar and wine, while she was being served the most ordinary food, as if she did not deserve proper service. For a brief moment, a feeling of unease rose within her. Not because of the food, not because of this small inconvenience, but because of the feeling of being treated as someone who was not worthy. She was the only woman in the compartment with a different skin color, and she felt it, not just in her eyes, but in her unintentional yet meaningful actions. Samantha Hayes was a fighter and a fighter, never one to be held back, and she knew right away that something bigger was about to happen. Something that would not only change Stratus Air, but would force the entire airline industry to face the realities they had tried so hard to hide. As Samantha Hayes sat in first class, surrounded by luxury and comfort, she felt a distinct sense of alienation. Eyes swept over her as if she were invisible, as if she were a ghost among the other passengers, who never seemed to notice the powerful black woman sitting in their midst. In this luxurious cabin, where everything exuded nobility and respect, Samantha knew she was not being treated as part of that world. She was the only one with different skin, and that difference was evident not only in her skin, but in the gestures, looks, and disrespect of those around her. Everything about this flight, from her carefully chosen outfit to the confidence that radiated from her every move, reflected the success of a black woman who had fought tirelessly to get to where she was in the tech world. But now, in the luxury of the cabin, her success seemed to be seen through the passing glances, the subtle distinctions she had become so accustomed to. When the waitress returned, with a wry smile, to announce that her order, lobster chowder and steak, was gone, Samantha couldn't help but feel like she'd been let down. It wasn't an accident. It felt hollow, looking down at the cold sandwich and glass of water before her, as if they weren't food at all, but a symbol of disrespect, of a world where people like her deserved only cheap, inferior things. Meanwhile, the people around her, the fair-skinned ones, were being served luxury items like caviar and champagne. Not that they needed it. They were just passengers like her, sitting in first class, where everything was expensive. But this difference, this clear distinction, could not be ignored. Samantha watched, moment by moment, from the caviar they were enjoying to the champagne glasses they raised. All of it was an affirmation of the respect she had never received. And then, like a flashback, the indescribable emotions of past discrimination flooded back. The cold stares when she entered the boardrooms, the opportunities she had missed because of her skin color, the soft but meaningful words she had been forced to endure. This was not the first time Samantha had faced such discrimination. There had been times when she had simply kept quiet, telling herself to persevere and continue to prove her worth. But today, in this first-class cabin, where everything was so beautifully decorated, where everyone else was treated with such obvious respect, she could no longer remain silent. That feeling, the bitter realization that she wasn't seen as someone else, wasn't random. It was a harsh reality that black women like her had faced all their lives. But today, in the cabin of the plane, Samantha knew she wasn't going to let it go. She wasn't going to do what she always did, just let it pass like a breeze. She wasn't one to be erased. And this time, she decided the silence would stop. When Samantha asked to see the manager, she could feel the tension in the air. The flight attendant, who had tried to avoid her eyes, could no longer hide her confusion. Her expression was awkward, but there was no lack of coldness in her direct refusal of Samantha's request. She tried to be quiet, even casual, but Samantha was not swayed. She insisted on an explanation. Why am I being treated like this? The question was not just a request for fairness, but an assertion of her right to be respected. In the first-class cabin, the other passengers had already begun to pay attention, their gazes slowly drifting over and whispers gradually blossomed. Some even whispered, sensing the injustice in their treatment, but they still did not dare to object. Their silence only added to the contradiction, as if they understood, but did not have the courage to speak up. And then the manager appeared. A man in a uniform, looking busy but clearly not understanding the gravity of the situation. His apology, rushed through, seemed more like a coping mechanism than a genuine understanding. "We're sorry for the inconvenience," he said, but Samantha could tell right away that his apology made no difference. It was just an attempt at placation, a small concession to keep the situation from escalating. But Samantha didn't need comfort. She didn't need cheap apologies. She needed change. Right here in first class, in that moment, everything changed. Silence was no longer an option. Samantha sat silently, her eyes never leaving the flight manager, but a strong feeling was rising inside her, a determination that would not be subdued. She realized that a simple apology, no matter how sincere, could not be the end of this story. It was an empty gesture, an unnecessary evasion. This discrimination was not a small mistake, but a system. A culture that was unacknowledged and unchallenged. She could not just let it pass in silence, could not let this sadness quietly fade away. With a steely determination, she stood up. She was not demanding just a personal apology, but a public, formal apology. "I don't want this to stop here," she said, her voice firm, not an easy request, but a statement. Stratus Air must apologize to all the passengers on this flight, not just for discriminating against me, but for the way they have hurt the dignity of all those who were treated that way. Her words rang out as a powerful statement. Samantha was not just fighting for herself, but for everyone who had ever been overlooked, discriminated against because of their skin color, their background, because of what they could not change. She did not want to be a lonely voice in the crowd, but a strong voice for everyone who had been silenced. This was not a fight just for her, but for all the passengers who had not had the opportunity to speak their own truth. And in that moment, Samantha Hayes became more than just a powerful CEO. She became a symbol of change, a person standing up against injustice. She was determined to use her power to spark a revolution in the airline industry. Not just for Stratus Air, but for the entire industry, about how they treat customers, especially customers of color. She would not stop there. She would never let her voice be silenced, never allow silence to continue in the airline industry. The flight manager, his face pale, and the stewardess standing beside him, both of them were well aware that what had just happened could not be ignored. The eyes of the surrounding passengers still lingered in the air, full of attention and concern. After a moment of silence, the manager, his voice low but clear, bowed his head and said, "We are very sorry about today's incident. We apologize for making you feel disrespected. We promise to do everything we can to ensure this never happens again." The promise seemed more than just an apology, but an admission that they had been wrong, a commitment not just to Samantha, but to all the forgotten people in this industry. Samantha stood there not saying anything right away, but inside, she felt not satisfaction but recognition. She didn't want to just accept an apology. These promises weren't enough to make her feel at ease. But she understood that, with her actions, she had created an important milestone. The airline industry could no longer hide, could no longer allow passengers like her, people like her, to be treated as part of a small game. And most of all, she realized that this was not a simple victory for her personally, but a victory for fairness, for change. She publicly called on Stratus Air to reform its diversity policies and employee training programs. We can't just talk about diversity. You have to do it. You have to train every employee to understand that respect is the foundation of a modern industry. An industry cannot survive in segregation, in ignorance of cultural and racial differences. Samantha's story didn't stop there. It was like a wildfire that sparked a powerful conversation about racial equality in the hospitality industry. People started talking, started realizing that discrimination, no matter what form it took, could no longer be tolerated. Conferences on consumer rights, on respecting diversity in the workplace and in the service industry, began to be held across the country. And in every conversation, Samantha Hayes' name was mentioned with respect and admiration. Her story has inspired many others who want to make a change, who were once silent and afraid to stand up. Because of her, many have found the strength to speak up, to demand justice, and most importantly, to demand to be treated with the respect they deserve. She has not only made a change in a company, but in an industry where the changes needed were long overdue, but now irreversible. Samantha Hayes' story is more than just a confrontation in the first-class cabin of Stratus Air Flight 917. It is a powerful message to all of us about the unacceptability of discrimination in any form. Seemingly small actions, like a denied meal, a superficial apology, can be easily overlooked, but sometimes those moments are the decisive turning points, creating huge changes not only in a life, but in an entire society. Samantha has proven that sometimes a small but decisive action can make the world take a second look, can make an industry question how it treats people it once took for granted. Her story is not just about personal triumph. It is about a powerful message of respect and equality, not just in the first class of a flight, but in every corner of society. Those who witnessed it, whether silent or only able to see it from the outside, realized that discrimination, in any form, cannot exist in a world that is hungry for change. Samantha's actions have sparked a new wave in the aviation industry, where people like her no longer have to stay silent and accept discrimination, but instead, they have the right to speak up and demand respect. And despite the naysayers, despite the voices of protest, the change Samantha brought was irreversible. This flight was more than just a story about discrimination in first class. It was the beginning of a revolution in the way the airline industry and its services treat their customers. She spoke up not just for herself, but for a generation that was hungry for equality, respect, and justice. Samantha Hayes' story is a powerful reminder that while discrimination may be happening silently in seemingly insignificant moments, we have the power and the authority to change it. Every small act can be a spark that can ignite great change. And when we dare to stand up for justice, when we continue to fight for mutual respect, we will be the ones leading the way to a more just and humane world. What about you? Have you ever felt ignored in a space where you deserved respect? Will you stay silent or will you speak up? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We would love to hear your story. If this story makes you think, don't forget to like, share, to spread this message, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow the next inspirational journey. Because sometimes, all it takes to change a whole system is one person sitting in the right seat.